Imagine stepping into a world where silence is so complete it roars, where your every breath crystallizes in the air and hangs like smoke before vanishing, and where the nearest living soul beyond your campfire may be 100 miles away. Welcome, traveler, to the frontier, and before you smirk thinking you'd thrive here with your gym workouts, tactical flashlight, and YouTube camping tutorials, pause and truly ask yourself, could you survive a single day when the only thing between you and death is your stubbornness? The year is 1834, the place a frozen valley in Montana, and in the brittle dawn, a boy new to the mountains, soft in hands and spirit, is dragged awake by the gravel voice of Black Harris, a trapper whose beard could scrub pans and whose eyes carry the weight of too many winters. Their shelter is nothing more than a lean-to of pine boughs, roof sagging with frost, but to the boy it already feels like a palace compared to nights when he shivered under open skies, learning that the stars, however beautiful, offer no warmth. He pulls on buckskin pants stiff with ice, a wool shirt that smells of smoke, and a heavy capote coat lined with fur that does little against the bite of wind, and he joins Harris by a small fire where snow is melting in a blackened pot. Coffee boils, thick, bitter, the kind that could stand a spoon upright, and Harris mutters that out here, coffee isn't a drink, it's salvation, that a man would sooner go hungry than go without its bitter comfort. Breakfast is jerky so dry it's nearly wood, chewed until his jaw aches, but it fuels the body just enough to march, rifles slung, traps waiting. They tramp through snow, boots crunching in rhythm, steam rising from their breath like dragon smoke, and Harris explains once more, as he always does, that beavers are creatures of habit, that they gnaw the same trees, slide the same channels, and that knowing this is not trivia but life itself, because every pelt is not just money but firewood, powder, salt, survival bought one skin at a time. The boy nods, pretending to understand, but truthfully his mind reels at the vastness of the wilderness, the way every tree and rock hides both danger and opportunity. And when Harris kneels at the riverbank, brushing aside snow to reveal a trap chain, the boy watches with held breath. Up comes a beaver, drowned, its thick pelt gleaming even in death, and Harris grunts approval, sets to work skinning with quick, precise motions, warning that one slip of the knife ruins value. The boy mimics clumsily at the next trap, fumbling, hands shaking, and Harris growls, "Commit to the cut, timid knives waste hides," a lesson carved as much into the boy's mind as the carcass at his feet. By midday, 3 beavers hang heavy in their packs, pelts promising trade, meat promising stews, but the weight is nothing compared to the tension of fresh grizzly tracks carved deep into the snow. Harris freezes, signals silence, then mutters that a big male passed through an hour earlier. The boy's heart hammers, rifle clutched, but Harris insists they sing, shout, make noise, because bears, like men, kill most often by accident, and better to sound foolish than end as a half-eaten warning in the snow. They return to camp tired, shoulders aching, frost-biting fingers, and yet there is no rest, for pelts must be scraped, stretched and dried on willow hoops, mistakes punished by rot that would waste weeks of labor. Harris works with steady rhythm, telling stories between strokes of his knife, of winters when men ate moccasins boiled into leather soup, of ambushes survived by pure luck, of comrades swallowed by avalanches whose bodies were never found. The boy listens, drawn between horror and awe, realizing slowly that each tale is not bravado, but instruction, oral history of survival, written not on paper but in scars. Night falls, the sky ablaze with stars, and the boy curls under buffalo hide, smoke from the fire scratching his throat, listening to the whisper of wolves in the distance, a sound both beautiful and terrifying. And you, yes you, sitting safe with walls around you, how long would you last hearing those howls without panic clawing into your chest? Morning comes harsh and unyielding, and with it a new challenge: visitors. A jingle of bells announces the arrival of crow riders, 8 of them, ponies painted, feathers bright even against snow, and the boy stiffens with fear, hand on rifle, but Harris only mutters, "Crow, not Blackfoot. Be calm, let me talk." Trading begins, but it is not the swift exchange of goods, you know. It is theater, ritual, every gesture weighted with respect or insult. Harris offers tobacco, receives buffalo tongue, voices formal greetings, and only then does real barter start. The boy fumbles, finally offering a spare knife in exchange for chokecherries, and though sweat trickles down his back despite the cold, 2 Moons, the crow leader, accepts with a nod. Harris later explains that today's gift is tomorrow's alliance, that misstep here means scalp there, and that survival isn't just steel and powder, but diplomacy as sharp as any blade. As the riders vanish into snow, Harris fixes the boy with a look and says, "Remember, kid, mountains have eyes. Friends today might be enemies tomorrow, and Blackfoot don't forgive." That night, the boy turns over the pouch of chokecherries in his hands, realizing they are more than food. They are proof he has begun to carve his place in a world where missteps are fatal. Days later, as weather turns, clouds bruised purple, air tasting metallic, Harris warns a storm is coming. They pack quickly, but disaster strikes when a pack horse stumbles, supplies tumbling down rocky slope. Harris curses, insists on recovering them, while the boy is ordered to make shelter fast. Alone for the first time, panic gnaws, wind cutting like blades, snow beginning to swirl. And here, yes here, I turn to you again. What would you do? Alone, wet, freezing, with night falling. Would you remember the lessons, lash branches into walls, stack stones as windbreak, coax sparks from flint into fragile flame? Or would you sit paralyzed, waiting for rescue that never comes? The boy works, trembling, fire catching just before despair, smoke filling crude shelter as snow hisses against it, and when Harris finally returns half dead with salvaged supplies, he finds not a corpse, but a boy alive, shivering, smoke-stained, but alive. Harris grins through cracked lips and mutters, "Maybe you'll make it yet." And in that moment, the boy feels not triumph, but something greater, belonging, initiation into a brotherhood of survival, where every day lived is a miracle, carved against the indifference of the mountains. The storm passed, but left the world remade, snow piled deep, silence pressing like a weight, and as dawn bled pale over the mountains, the boy stirred beneath stiff buffalo hide, every muscle aching, but Harris was already up, fire coaxed back from embers, coffee boiling in that same blackened pot. Muttering about wasted daylight, the boy rose, teeth chattering, feet raw in damp moccasins, yet the moment food hit his lips, jerky soaked in coffee to soften it, he felt the brutal truth of mountain life. Comfort was never guaranteed, only earned in scraps. They moved west, following Harris's lead through snowdrifts that swallowed their knees, packs heavy with pelts and salvaged supplies, and by midday, the boy realized that out here, time meant nothing. There were no clocks, only the sun, the feel of shadows stretching long, the rhythm of hunger in his gut. At a clearing, they found elk tracks, and Harris froze, eyes narrowing, whispering that meat was worth more than gold in these conditions, so they stalked slow, the boy trying to mimic Harris's silence, placing boots where branches would not crack, breath held until lungs burned. When Harris finally raised his rifle and fired, the shot cracked like thunder, elk scattering, but one cow stumbled, dropped, heart pierced cleanly. The boy rushed forward, pulse racing, but Harris was already kneeling, blade flashing, murmuring that every animal deserved respect, that nothing must be wasted. The boy gagged as warm blood steamed into snow, but Harris barked that squeamishness kills, that a man who cannot cut cannot eat, so the boy forced hands steady, knife trembling as he peeled hide, muscle, fat, learning where to slice, where to pull, until meat lay stacked in crimson heaps. They packed what they could, left off of wolves already circling at a distance, and Harris muttered darkly, "They'll follow us tonight, best keep fire high." Back at camp, the boy watched Harris build a smoking rack, hang strips of meat, and set fat to render, explaining how pemmican was made. Dried meat pounded into powder, mixed with hot fat and berries, sealed into pouches that lasted years. Trail food, Harris called it, keeps a man alive when snow swallows the world. The boy worked until his arms screamed, pounding meat with stone, sweat freezing to his skin. But as pemmican piled, he felt pride burn through exhaustion. Food meant power, survival stretched into weeks. That night, other trappers arrived. Caleb Jackson, grizzled, scarred, flanked by men called Broken Hand and Webb, their faces maps of years in the wild. They shared whiskey that burned like fire, and stories sharper than knives, ambushes by Blackfoot, starvation winters, avalanches, swallowing whole camps. And the boy sat wide-eyed, realizing that each scar carried instruction, each laugh wrapped around grief that in the mountain storytelling was survival manual, disguised as memory. Harris introduced the boy with a grunt. Quick study, maybe won't die too soon, and though crude, it warmed him more than whiskey. Around the fire they played poker with coffee beans as currency. Jokes muttered, warnings traded, and the boy saw that mountain men were not lone wolves. As novels claimed, they were threads in a fragile web, reliant on each other for news, for trade, for companionship that staved off madness. As dawn broke, Jackson's men left, traveling by night to avoid Blackfoot, and Harris muttered that trust was fleeting, that even friends could turn if desperation bit hard enough. Days blurred into labor, checking traps, skinning beaver, stretching hides, cutting firewood, every task urgent because idleness killed as swiftly as cold. One evening, while returning from the river, they spotted smoke rising distant, another camp, and Harris growled low, hand on rifle, warning that some men would slit throats for pelts rather than trade fair. They circled wide, the boy's stomach knotted, learning that out here danger wore many faces, beast, storm, or man. That night, Harris told him flat, "You think wolves scare me? Men scare me worse. Wolves just want meat. Men want everything." Sleep came uneasy, dreams tangled with images of knives flashing in firelight. The next week brought fresh trial, a river crossing. Spring melt had begun, ice breaking, water running black and fast, and Harris declared they had no choice but to ford. The boy stared, heart hammering, because to fall meant death by freezing, body dragged under ice. Harris stripped, lashed gear high on horses, waded in first, water to his chest, teeth clenched against shock, shouting for the boy to follow. Every step numbed legs until they felt like stone, current tugging like claws, and when one horse stumbled, the boy nearly screamed. But Harris roared back, "Don't panic, move steady or you're done." Somehow, soaked, shivering, they reached far bank, but Harris made them strip and dry instantly, warning that wet clothes kill faster than hunger. The boy sat shaking, fire smoking weakly, but he understood now. Rivers were as deadly as grizzlies, and Harris's scars were not exaggerations, but survival written on flesh. Days later, hunger gnawed again, traps yielding less, pelts fewer, game scarce, and Harris muttered that lean times test men hardest, that many died not of violence, but of slow starvation, bodies found curled by dead fires, faces hollow. The boy chewed hard jerky, stomach unsatisfied, and felt the creeping fear of scarcity. To distract him, Harris told stories of rendezvous, wild summer gatherings, where hundreds of trappers and tribes traded furs for powder, knives, cloth, liquor, a carnival of chaos in valleys green with grass. The boy imagined it, the relief of company, the madness of drink, but Harris added grimly that many never made it there, cut down by ambush or hunger long before. As days grew longer, spring thaw began in earnest, snow melting, rivers swelling, trails turning to mud. Wolves thinned, bears woke, hungrier and meaner, and one dusk they stumbled on fresh tracks, claws wide as hands, scat steaming, and Harris ordered rifles primed. The boy's throat tightened, and I'll pause here, be honest, could you keep walking, knowing death lurked unseen, massive, silent, able to crush bone in a swipe? They pushed on, voices raised, Harris humming tunelessly, the boy croaking half-songs until camp was reached. Fire blazed high that night, pelts hung close, rifles never out of reach. Harris muttered, "Grizzly don't fear much, best make them fear fire." The boy lay awake, every snap of twig outside a warning, every gust of wind a growl. By morning, snow had melted enough to reveal green shoots pushing through soil, a reminder that seasons turn, that life clawed its way even through harshest ground. But Harris warned not to relax, not yet, because spring brought floods, sickness, ambushes, every danger shifting shape but never gone. And so they moved camp again, gear packed light, trails winding toward higher valley, both man and boy leaner, harder, eyes sharper, and though Harris joked he'd still call him Greenhorn until the day he grew a beard, truth hummed beneath the boy was no longer a stranger here, but part of the wild, tested, tempered, scarred, and though storms, beasts, and men would still test him, he had crossed the invisible line from guest to resident, from boy to survivor. Spring bled into summer, though summer in the high Rockies was never gentle. Days blistered under sun that reflected off granite like fire. Nights froze hard enough to stiffen water skins, and the boy learned quickly that seasons here were not measured in comfort, but in which enemy pressed harder, cold, hunger, or exhaustion. The rivers, swollen with melt, carried logs and boulders downstream like toys, and Harris reminded him often that a slip on slick rocks could snap bones, and bones out here meant death, no matter how small the break. Days stretched long, sweat mixing with grime, mosquitoes swarming thick as smoke, black flies biting until blood speckled their arms, and the boy found himself longing for the clean silence of winter storms. Out here, even bugs were relentless, teaching that comfort was an illusion city folk still clung to. Harris trained him in every chore, from tanning hides with brains and smoke to carving snowshoes for winter, insisting that preparation never ends, that the man who waits until the cold comes is already dead. At night, they sat by fire, Harris telling stories of men who went mad alone, who wandered camps talking to shadows, who drowned in shallow rivers because their bodies were too weak to fight current. And the boy realized that survival was as much about the mind as the body, that despair killed as surely as hunger. They crossed paths with more trappers too, men gaunt from lean seasons, some friendly, some suspicious. One camp especially tense where Harris's hand never left his rifle, whispering later that desperation drives men to murder faster than hate. The boy watched, understood, and added another lesson: trust sparingly, guard fiercely. Weeks later, they stumbled into rendezvous, that chaotic carnival Harris had promised, and the boy felt his jaw drop at the sight. Hundreds of men, lodges of canvas, horses tethered in meadows, fires blazing, music and drunken laughter rolling across valleys like thunder, furs piled high, whiskey flowed like rivers, knives and guns changed hands in wild trades, and tribes mingled with trappers in a fragile harmony fueled by commerce and drink. For the boy it was overwhelming, a sudden flood of faces after months of solitude, and he clung to Harris's side, wide-eyed as Harris bargained with iron calm, pelts stacked against powder, cloth, kettles, fresh rifles, The boy traded too, timid at first, then bold, offering hides for tobacco, knife for flour, feeling pride burn at being taken seriously. But Harris pulled him aside, growled warnings. Enjoy it, but don't forget, it's all fragile. Whiskey makes friends fast and enemies faster. One wrong step and blood spills quick. True enough, the boy saw fights break out, knives flashing, men dragged bleeding, only to rise and drink again by dusk. For a week they stayed, feasting, resting, replenishing supplies, and for the first time the boy felt almost human again, not beast, not ghost, but man. Yet when they left, packs heavier, hearts lighter, he realized he missed the silence, the purity of wilderness, stripped of noise. Summer marched on, hunting good, traps filling, pelts drying, but danger never vanished. One dusk they crossed into canyon shadow and found themselves ambushed. 3 rifles cracking, bullets whining past. Blackfoot. Harris roared, returned fire, shouting for the boy to flank. Heart thundering, lungs raw, the boy obeyed, crawling through brush, rifle clutched, until he saw one warrior rise from cover. Instinct took over, rifle raised, trigger pulled, recoil slamming, and the man fell. Silence rang louder than shots, and the boy froze, staring at the life he had taken, hands trembling, stomach twisting. Harris dragged him away, muttering, "No time, move," and only later, safe, did he speak. "Don't dwell. Out here it's them or us. You hesitate, you're dead." The boy nodded, sick but understood. Another line crossed, another piece of innocence buried in the snow. Weeks blurred again, hunting, trading, endless labor, and slowly the boy realized he was no longer counting days. The wilderness had swallowed clocks, calendars, left only cycles of hunger, cold, warmth, and fire. His body lean, scars multiplying, his mind harder, sharper. He began to feel what Harris always knew, that survival was less about mastery and more about humility, acknowledging that the mountains owed you nothing. By autumn, pelts were stacked high, camp supplied, but storms loomed again, clouds black as ink spilling over ridges. Harris, older now, coughed often, grip weaker, and the boy saw the truth that no man conquered the mountains forever, that time takes all, even legends. One night Harris sat by fire, whiskey in hand, eyes distant, and told him plain, "These mountains will take me some day, maybe soon, but you've got the stubbornness to last." The boy listened, chest tight, understanding that mentorship was ending, that soon he would stand alone. When winter's first storm hit, howling winds, snow driving like nails, Harris took sick, fevered, shivering even by fire. The boy worked alone, chopping, trapping, cooking, nursing his teacher with broths of bitter herbs, fighting to keep him alive. For days Harris lingered, muttering half-coherent tales, warnings, laughter tangled with coughs, until one dawn he did not wake. The boy sat by the fire, snow falling soft, body hollow, yet even in grief he understood the truth. Harris had given him everything, and the mountains had claimed their due. He buried Harris shallow, as all men were buried here, stones piled high, rifle raised in final salute, then turned back to camp, where smoke curled from fire he alone had built, where pelts and meat waited, where survival still demanded. And here, reader, yes, you again, look at yourself. Could you bury the only soul who kept you alive, and still rise to tend fire, to set traps, to eat alone while wolves howled, knowing no rescue comes, no comfort exists but your own grit? Could you last? The boy did. Winter pressed hard, but he endured, each day a small victory, each fire a declaration that he refused to vanish. He hunted, he trapped, he remembered every lesson, and slowly he realized he was no longer the greenhorn trailing behind, but the man leading forward. Months later, when spring came again, melting snow into torrents, he stood at the riverbank, lean, scarred, hardened, and he laughed bitterly, because the truth was clear. There was no end to this life, no finish line, Only survival stretched one day to the next. And as you sit warm, scrolling this tale, sipping coffee too easy to brew, dare to ask yourself, would you last a single day in that world, or would the wilderness take you in a heartbeat, writing your name in snow, erasing it by sunrise, leaving nothing but silence and wind?